Hello and welcome to Digital Brain. This is a blog all about the digital art of video games, and this week we're going to be talking about the very tricky subject of difficulty in games. And this actually comes at a very interesting time, what of the release of Cuphead on PCs and consoles last week. Cuphead is a very beautifully animated love letter to 1930s animation. It's also really difficult, and that's something that hasn't passed by the games media. Of course, it's been lauded and criticised in equal measure. If you go on Twitter, that age-old debate has been ripped open again. Should games make gamers work harder, or should they go easy on us? Now, Cuphead is very difficult, but actually it's not quite as straightforward as you might think. Cuphead actually has an easy mode. Each level is split up between simple and regular variants. The simple variety poses an easier challenge for those who just want to enjoy the graphics, while the regular flavour is aimed at players who enjoy more of a challenge. It's easy to see why this might raise a few eyebrows. On one hand, Cuphead appears to be giving a leg up to players with lesser abilities. Some people might see that as somehow cheating the game, but on the flip side to that, Cuphead is actually being quite progressive with its naming conventions. Simple and regular sound much better on the ears than the traditional easy and hard modes, and it's certainly a far cry from id Software mocking their players for choosing the easy mode in games like Doom. But this issue is much more than simple naming conventions. Gaming has done a lot of growing up in the last 10 years, and our definition of a video game no longer requires a win or lose state. Instead, games are far more about immersion and transformative role-playing than beating the game, and by now, winning merely means seeing the end of the story. This is especially true in games like Gone Home, a first-person exploration game set in an empty family home. It's a story of forbidden teen love set against a backdrop of 90s nostalgia, and it's a story-driven experience with a very simple interaction interface. There is no skill ceiling or prerequisite gaming experience needed here, you just walk around and look at things. A difficulty level in Gone Home is a bit irrelevant. Your success in the game merely depends on how much of the story you want to see, so scaling that to an easy or hard mode just wouldn't work. It manages to immerse the player in a world of intrigue with no more than two input methods, one for moving and one for picking things up. That's it. On the flip side to that, there's Dark Souls. Famed for its brutal difficulty, there are no options to change difficulty in Dark Souls, either you get the game or you don't. The Souls series itself is unapologetic in its snubbery of concessions to the player, and it's actually better off for it. Besting a brutal foe in Dark Souls is the gaming's closest equivalent to ecstatic, heart-pounding highs that you can get. The elation and adrenaline rush of finally pushing past that really tough boss is one of gaming's most empowering feelings. Because of that, it's really hard to argue for an easy mode in the Souls games. Even as an optional extra, it would really harm the legitimacy of those powerful feelings that only the Souls series can conjure. But saying that, it's a bit of a shame when people were locked out of an incredible experience because it was too intimidating. There are lots of shades of grey in between Gone Home and Dark Souls. Most mainstream games seek to empower the player in an experience that isn't traditionally hard, but is careful to not insult the player by being too simplistic. An admirable middle ground, sure, but it's a middle ground aimed at an already existing market. It's true that most mainstream games aren't made for people who aren't gamers. By default, the most commonly enjoyed games often fail to pull in outsiders because of their insistence on already existing trends. Games like Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry 3, they all aim at empowering the player rather than bewilder them. But this is a middle ground occupied by gamers who already know what they're doing. What about more casual gamers or people that just play games on their phone? Despite being the most readily available way to play games around the globe, mobile games still occupy a sort of outsider status in gaming. This is usually because game mechanics on mobile games are hamstrung by paywalls and advertising. Mobile gaming is much less about entertaining people on the go, and more about drip-feeding cash from people's wallets, and the snobbery towards mobile games by so-called hardcore gamers would prevent companies from taking the platform seriously. What doesn't help is that online communities surrounding games are often the most toxic you will ever find, with games like Counter-Strike and Overwatch proving to be the worst offenders. If you're not good at the game, you can expect your teammates to bully you into submission before you leave. Big profile YouTubers such as PewDiePie don't help either, with the casual abuse of racist terms, and it's not out of the ordinary to see alt-right baiting memes circulating various Reddit communities. Gamers have worked really hard to make sure online gaming is as exclusionary as possible, and the Gamergate debacle of 2014 only entrenched that further. At the moment, it's a bit difficult to recommend video games as a hobby to your friends. It's not all bad though. Luckily there are plenty of games that have experimented with accessibility and made it work. Alto's Adventure on mobile is a wonderful example of a simple interaction interface mapped over great game design. It's a runner game where tapping the screen makes your avatar jump over obstacles, but holding the button down will make your character slowly backflip. This simple one-button interface allows for a large branching of ideas. Do you play the next jump safe and simply hop over a chasm, or risk crashing by pulling off a backflip that gives you much more points? The levels slowly introduce a wider variety of jumps and challenges too. Eventually, another skier will start to chase you down the hill, and you have to pull off impressive backflips and tricks to increase the distance between you and him. Downwell 2 is a wonderful example of one-button game design. You simply fall down a well and hit one button to shoot bullets out of your shoes as you're falling. The aim is to get as far as possible. It's not as simple as that, of course. There's a lot of different obstacles in your way, and a nice array of enemy designs really help to diversify your approach to finishing each level. One Finger Death Punch is another really excellent example where hitting either the left or right mouse button will punch or kick in the relevant directions. This transforms the spectacle of fighting into a sort of rhythm game where you get to feel like Jackie Chan fending off immense waves of baddies. Just like the others mentioned here, there are a variety of bumps in the road and unique twists on the formula that change how you tackle each level. But it feels just as exciting finishing a level of One Finger Death Punch as it does punching waves of baddies in Arkham Asylum. It's possible to make the interface of your game accessible without harming the design element of the game. It just involves a bit of thinking outside the box and a lot of respect for the player. That's not to say that difficult games no longer have a place in 2017. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Some of the most immersive and groundbreaking experiences released this year were tough, brutal games where struggling is a key component to the game's success. XCOM 2's War of the Chosen expansion adds a bewildering array of difficult situations that will really bend your will to breaking points, and my personal favourite game of the year, Neo, is literally based on the tough foundations of the Dark Souls formula. With fast, bloody combat, it's not for the faint of heart. So it's not wise for these titles to cheapen their difficulty to appeal to a wider audience, and cutting out the tension of a difficult engagement would put a glass ceiling on the incredibly uplifting potential that difficult games have always possessed. Diluting art so that a wider audience can enjoy it shouldn't really be an option, but at the same time, gaming and gamers really need to diversify their definitions of accessibility. And that's the key. Difficult games should be allowed to happily sit alongside more relaxed experiences. Immersion can take many forms. Much like literature or movies, there will always be forms of art that are challenging to those who want it. But you wouldn't be criticised for enjoying Indiana Jones more than an Andrei Tarkovsky movie. In the spirit of inclusion, we should be rid of our ingrained snobbery when it comes to gaming. So, that takes us back to the question I posed at the start of the video. Should games make gamers work harder, or should they go easy on us? The answer is, who cares? What matters is that you make room for both types of games and a bit more in between, and eliminate this culture of snobbery that plagues online gaming communities. If hardened Counter-Strike fans are just as capable of enjoying Minecraft in creative mode, then there's no logical reason why the same gamers can't welcome easy modes in games like Cuphead. Similarly, if a busy adult has a tight schedule for a few hours of gaming a week, they shouldn't really be penalised for not having the hours to battle against obtuse game design. It's not really about picking a side between easy and hard, it's more about diversifying how we approach games and making accessibility less of a four-letter word.